Hey folks, it's Raine Grayson, director of the TMI Project Story Hour presents Period Power Stories. This past week, Kat, Tina, and I were guests on CRAMPED, an award-winning and critically acclaimed podcast hosted by Kate Helen Downey. Through CRAMPED, she investigates why the world knows so little about period pain. After living with what she calls death cramps for 20 years without a diagnosis, Kate set out to find answers. And along the way, she's discovered hard truths about how the medical system minimizes and misunderstands menstrual pain. As she puts it, having a microphone gets you more answers than having a uterus. The episode we joined is called Are the Young Crampers OK? Period Pain Education in High School. Because this conversation so closely aligns with the stories the Kingston High School Period Power Club students told through Period Power Stories, we wanted to share it with you here. And, of course, special thanks to Kate for inviting us onto her show. We had a blast, Kate. You can find more episodes of CRAMPED wherever you listen to podcasts. And now, here's our conversation on CRAMPED.
You've already heard some of my stories about having death cramps in middle and high school. Throwing up in school bathrooms, the school nurse rolling her eyes when I told her it was cramps, even as I was passing out. Being so convinced that my body was the only one in the world that did this that I didn't talk to my friends about it at all. So maybe it's not that surprising that I am desperately curious about what current high school and middle school students are experiencing. Does their sex ed now include anything about period pain and the conditions that cause it? Has having the internet and social media changed how they talk to their friends about this at all? Are they now able to, look up their symptoms on WebMD and show it to their nurses in order to be taken seriously? And why does our education system have such a hard time teaching basic body literacy?
What's happening to your body, we don't know, because we've never really studied the female body. Say it's all in my head, but the research is quite spotty. No, we've never really studied the female body. I go to the doctor to get dismissed. Try losing weight, you're just anxious. That's fine, that's cool, I'm not pissed. Just wait 10 years for a diagnosis. Psychosomatic, you're so dramatic. Hysterical, emotional, hormonal, erratic. Heart disease, chronic fatigue, depression and anxiety. Do you have pain? No, you don't, because we've never really studied the female body.
Welcome back to CRAMPED, the podcast where I try to find answers to my and other people's questions about their period pain. I'm your host, Kate Helen Downey. If you just found this podcast, you might want to go back and listen from the beginning of season 1. Then you'll get the whole story of my death cramps, my eventual diagnosis, and my eventual successful treatment, plus some of the history of women's healthcare and all the reasons why we've never really studied the female body, like the song says. And hey, just FYI, this is a completely independent podcast, which means I don't get paid. I'd love to get paid. I'd love to be able to do this full time and build this out to provide even more resources to even more crampers. You can directly support this work and literally pay my paycheck by going to patreon.com/cramped and signing up at any level. Even the free level helps me prove that people want this. Patreon members get full-length bonus episodes, ad-free episodes, and access to our Discord community that's full of other crampers sharing their own experiences, passing around information that's helped them. It's really nice in there. Now let's talk about period pain education in school. To my great relief, there are some schools where support actually exists for people who are getting their period. The support may not be coming from the official curriculum, and some members of the faculty may not even be happy that that support exists, but it exists. At Kingston High School in upstate New York, there is a group of students who have created the Period Power Club, a student club with one very supportive staff member advising. Their original goal was to get the school to provide the free period products that they were required by state law to provide, but weren't. Are you kidding? Period Power Club succeeded in getting those period products, but they didn't stop there. They put on a live show in their town called Period Power Stories, with students getting on stage and telling stories of ways periods had affected their lives. Period Power Club members had some help preparing for this show. The TMI Project, which is a Hudson Valley-based nonprofit and podcast that helps people develop personal stories around things they never thought they'd speak publicly about, they lent a hand helping students prepare and practice their stories. That performance was recorded, and it is now being released as a podcast series, also called Period Power Stories. With her permission, I'm going to play you one of the stories from that series. This is Kat.
Science and logic. Science makes the world go round. Science is medicine. My mom and her parents are all doctors. Growing up in such an intellectual household, information was given with scientific accuracy and a cold delivery. My grandma was an OBGYN in the former Soviet Union. She would share her stories in sometimes graphic detail. It desensitized me. I don't care about blood, and I'm probably more medically qualified than most school nurses. I knew about periods over a year before I got mine. I wasn't scared or confused. I knew what it was and the anatomical function of it. Science and logic. When I first got my period, I was at my grandparents' house where I live. I was wearing black and white striped pajamas. I woke up, looked down, and saw blood. I calmly found my mom. She showed me how to wash out the blood and put on a pad. No panic, no stress. It isn't scary, it's life. It's just how it is now, and that's okay. I'll deal with it. Science and logic. But there were still some things that caught me by surprise. It's my first year in high school band, and I'm on xylophone. Music has always been my safe space, but I'm not always confident in my own abilities. Fake it till you make it. That's what people say, and hey, it seems logical, so that's what I do. I've always been an anxious child. I never slept alone. I needed music and sound. As I grew up, my anxiety manifested in different ways, but somehow, never in performance. I could go on stage and perform in front of the entire school without trouble. But now, I'm having a hard time faking it until I make it. I'm comparing my mallet playing to my classmates who have years of experience. I feel like I'm not living up to their legacy. During my first state championship, my band only comes in 7th place. I'm crushed. I hate the feeling, and I'm determined to do better next time we perform. I love band, and I don't want my lack of confidence to ruin it for me. Between state championships and my next performance, I take time to learn and improve. I work hard at my skill, and it pays off. I finally start feeling like a true musician. My skills only increase over the course of the year, and by the end of it, I'm at an all-state level, the highest you can achieve. Now, I'm a senior. It's my final year in band. I've become a mentor. I care for the underclassmen and have become what we in band call their pit parent. I feel like I'm finally confident in my abilities. 4 days before my final state championships at Syracuse, however, it all comes crashing down. I'm sitting with my section in the band room preparing for the long weekend of performances ahead. My phone buzzes. I see that my best friend texted me. We end up getting into a huge fight. I do my best to carry on with the day and ignore the text, but I'm crushed. As the day goes on, my stomach really starts hurting. I go to the bathroom and see that my period has started almost an entire week early. The gravity of the situation starts to set in. That night, I cry myself to sleep. Even though the last thing I want to do is get out of bed, I force myself to go to school the next day. I have to be at practice for my bandmates. Championships are in 3 days, but all I can think about is how betrayed I feel. The bell rings, signaling the beginning of lunch. As I gather my things, I feel my pulse start to quicken and become deafening. I'm not okay. My anxiety is coming at me in full force. I stagger through the crowded hallway to get to the orchestra room. I always eat lunch in the orchestra room instead of the cafeteria. It's peaceful there, and now more than ever, I need that sense of peace. As my friends practice, I completely zone out. I can't stop thinking that if I weren't so stressed out, maybe I wouldn't have my period early. Something like this has never happened to me before. I have medications that regulate my menstrual cycle. Before now, I didn't know stress could cause periods to come early. It was jarring and scary. I'm so worried that getting my period early is going to ruin the entire experience of my last championship performance. I have an overwhelming urge to cry, but I can't let myself be vulnerable in front of my friends. I have my pit parent reputation to maintain. I'm a leader, a musician. Crying isn't metal, and I love metal. I can't hold it in anymore. I step outside the room and let a few tears fall. My stomach hurts. I can't tell if it's from cramps or anxiety. I can't stop thinking this is all my friends' fault. They ruined everything. After school, I have my band meeting where we do all of the yearly traditions that come before the championship, including the yearly talent show. I've been dreading the evening all day because I'm convinced with everything going on, I won't be able to be present and have a good time. All of my other bandmates help me to focus on having a good time, though. We play games and hang out and put on a killer talent show performance. With the support of my friends, I feel more prepared when I wake up on championship day. I board the bus, and to my surprise, the ride to championships is actually pretty great, too. I enjoy spending time with all of my other friends. The next day, there are so many emotions. My friends keep my spirits up. We have a fantastic lunch where we ride the carousel together in the mall food court. And then, it's the moment I've been waiting for. Time for our final performance, and I kill it. Sure, we come in 7th place overall again, but we get 1st place in another category. I'm overwhelmed by my feelings of success. I feel so supported by all of my other bandmates. It's been a crazy senior year. I know at graduation, I'll have a lot of knowledge to look back on. I learned that I deserve respect and that I can choose my friends. Getting my period early made me realize that other people aren't worth the stress. I should never let anyone have so much influence over my mental health to the point that they cause a change in my menstrual cycle. I also learned that my body responds to stress differently. People can get periods early or skip periods altogether because of stress. If I wasn't a part of Period Power Club where I was able to talk openly about my period without fear of being stigmatized, I don't know if all of these lessons would have been the ones I was willing to learn. Maybe, most important of all, I learned to listen to my body. It isn't all just science and logic. Our menstrual cycles and mental health are far more interconnected than I thought. Now, I know I'm graduating wiser, and while I might not be a pit parent anymore, I know I can help others realize their worth, like my band and Period Power Club helped me realize mine.
I loved listening to this story and this series so much. After spending so much time hyper-focused on the topic of period pain, it was a good reminder to me of how interwoven our periods and our period experiences are with all the other big events in our lives. That you can't, separate your period or your period pain from all the other things that are going on at the same time. I got to sit down with Kat, as well as with 2 of the people who helped make Period Power Stories possible. I had a lot of questions about the current state of period education in schools. And I also had questions about how she was able to stand up in front of an audience of her peers and her parents and her teachers and tell that really personal story about her period, when at that age, I couldn't imagine even telling my friends that my death cramps existed.
Hi, I'm Kat. I was the vice president of the Period Power Club back in high school. I'm currently a college student and a workshop leader with the TMI Project.
Kat, you're the one of all of us who has most recently gone through a high school education, a middle school education, and I would love to hear what your experience was, what kind of information you got from your school and the people in your school about what you could expect from your period?
I was in Catholic school my entire elementary and middle school life. The thing about Catholic school is that they don't have a lot of like the same regulations in terms of what they have to cover, especially for less core topics like health class. I recall in my 8th grade health class having to read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens and having that be like the center of our health class. It was so bizarre.
So helpful for people whose bodies are changing in so many ways and have so many questions.
Absolutely. And like I remember they like briefly touched on like maybe nutrition a little bit, not even. And like I had knowledge of this from my own experience because my grandmother was an OBGYN in the former Soviet Union and very little filter. So she made sure I knew everything in immense detail at a very young age.
Good. So maybe it balanced out with the Catholic school health education.
Yeah, they were no help, but my grandmother made sure I was informed. A lot of my classmates were not, though. That was the issue.
What would happen if someone got their period?
I don't even know. It was like never really talked about. I guess, people carried their own pads and tampons. They didn't have menstrual products in the restrooms. I don't even remember there being like disposal baskets. I don't remember what I did. That's just something, I tuned out a lot of the stuff from that time, but I just remember they were no help at all.
Everybody was just completely on their own, left to their own devices with knowledge, resources, everything.
Pretty much. And I remember I got like permission to carry ibuprofen on me, like as needed for cramps and whatnot, because I had irregular periods and like really bad cramping a lot of the times. Wasn't so much in middle school, more so started happening in high school. But like my freshman year of high school was COVID. So I didn't have to go in for a couple months, and then it was like 2 days a week. So it was more manageable. But they didn't have menstrual product dispensers up until Period Power Club, basically forced them to.
Yeah.
Well, we had a male principal, and he got removed. I think it was like early junior year. He tweeted a homophobic slur. It was this whole thing. So he was removed. And then she was the acting principal for a while. She basically stepped up and like within 2 weeks of her being in power, got us the menstrual product dispensers.
I'm sure there were also like so many other great changes that had needed to happen, but what's an immediate like experiential difference of who's in power of the budget here? Yeah.
And then I remember my high school health class, sophomore year, they didn't really touch on menstruation. I don't think we got to like make a replica of female anatomy using like foam blocks that interconnected to each other. Like the cylinder's your fallopian tube, and it goes from the ovaries to the uterus.
So they were just like regular foam blocks, like they weren't even like the actual shape of the organs.
Nope, it was just like a big like cube was the uterus, and it just like just a general idea. And then like they showed like different kinds of like birth control. I think they showed a couple different menstrual products, but they didn't really explain what a period was, why it happened. So I'm sure a lot of people were still very confused. The guys did have to sit in on it, though, in high school, because it was a big part of the class.
They got to play with blocks.
Well, they were making replicas of male anatomy with the foam blocks.
Which is a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember we brought in a cancer survivor. She had, like, cancer multiple times, different kinds. And so she was talking to us about early detection, checking specifically for breast and testicular cancer. And she brought in a bunch of silicone replicas of breasts and balls. And so all the girls got to like check for lumps on the breast, and the guys had the testicles, and it was very, very unserious, as you would imagine a group of like 14-year-old boys with fake balls.
Yeah, I can imagine. If there wasn't anything about menstruation, there definitely wasn't anything about period pain.
Oh, absolutely not.
You said you had pretty bad cramps in middle school, right? And did those continue into high school?
Especially into high school. I mean, middle school, it was, I think relatively normal, if not a little bit worse than normal. But high school, they got bad. My period, and sometimes it wouldn't come for like a month or two, and then it would come back with a fury. Sometimes I'd have to go to the nurse, and it'd be so bad I'd have to get picked up early from school, and I'd just spend the rest of the day laying in bed.
I've been there.
At least the nurses were pretty nice about it.
Good. What kind of difference did you see once Period Power Club was established? What ways did it change the experience in high school?
Well, we had access to menstrual products now.
That's a big one.
More so than before. Yeah, that was a pretty big deal. A lot of people made fun of it, because it's kind of like, oh, an unnecessary feminist organization. Why are you guys talking about it? This is so extra. You guys are doing too much. But like kind of more quietly, people became a bit more comfortable, I feel, around menstruation, especially not out in public and loud, but like with your friends, you're more willing to talk about it. Yeah. But also my senior year of high school, we got to do this presentation at Vassar. And as a trial run before we went to Vassar, we were teaching a bunch of the freshmen. So it was just like a bunch of freshmen sitting through a little TED talk on menstruation. And as a part of it, we made it interactive. We handed around the menstrual products that the school was providing, which weren't great. You could tear apart the tampons really easily. It's just, really questionable.
Yeah.
And there was an instance where a guy hands his friend a tampon, and once he realizes what he's holding, he freaks out and chucks it across the room like he's going to catch a period. It's not contagious, I promise you.
I remember that. I remember in freshman year of high school, like my backpack tipping over and like I had a tampon in there and it fell out and all the guys like picked their feet up like it was a mouse. It's like it's in the wrapper.
Yeah, that's something I never understood.
Yeah. It's really cool to hear you say that people were, dicks about it. Like everybody's a dick in high school. They made fun of it a little bit and then it was just normalized. And you kind of like absorbed that ridicule a little bit. And then you got to kind of raise the bar of what gets talked about, what is normal. And that's so important and so huge because just raising the bar that much makes it possible for like people like me in high school to maybe be like, hey, wait a minute, like I get really bad cramps. Does anybody else get that? What is that? And that would have been life-changing for me at that age. That's so cool. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Because we never really started the female body.
Welcome back to Cramped. I am so fascinated about what it is like today to go through middle school and high school, get your period, and what kind of support and education you get. I was in high school 20 years ago. That's terrifying. And while it's disappointing to see that in some ways, period pain education has stayed exactly the same, which is to say, pretty non-existent, there are reasons to hope. One reason is Tina.
I'm Tina, the tampon lady, and I'm really known as Tina Diurna, or Miss Diurna, if you're a student at Kingston High School.
And what do you do at Kingston High School?
I'm the transition coordinator, so I help kids transition out of the high school into career, whatever that looks like for them, whether it's college, career, or trade school, military. And then I also advise the Period Power Club.
I'm especially interested in what you saw before you started Period Power Club, or before you helped the students start it, the status quo pre-Period Power Club.
So pre-Period Power Club, we had done like a diaper drive once, and we received like thousands of diapers. And I really loved that idea. And so I was like, all right, well, what else do we need in the school? Because we have a clothing cabinet, we had deodorant, we also now have free food in our free store. And one of the biggest things that we continued to like lack was tampons and pads and like period products. And so I just wanted to have period products in our school. I take an intern from MSW programs, so like students who are studying to be a social worker. I was like, all right, this is your job. Figure out why we don't have it and solve the problem. And my intern found a bunch of documentation that was like, we're supposed to have this, like it's a state mandate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so then she worked with the students, like found a group of students who was interested in creating this club. And they started writing letters to the Board of Ed and to the school principal. They started asking for meetings. It was almost a year later. We got period dispensers in the school. And then after that, we finally got period products in the school. And we're still kind of fighting for like better quality products. They're super old. They fall apart. They're not great quality. And it became more about sharing a story, talking to the community, but also being like, fine, if you're going to supply us with this product, we'll just continue fundraising for the good stuff. Yeah. And each teacher who self-identifies wanting a basket, they get a basket from us, and we supply that throughout our school.
Stories like this make me feel a lot of conflicting emotions. One, I'm so happy that people like Tina and her former intern exist. These are people who work within a structure who can say, hey, wait a minute, here's a super basic thing that isn't happening. Why isn't it happening? And then they turn that into a teaching opportunity that empowers students. That's awesome. But also, what do you mean it's a state mandate to provide period products to students, and it still took over a year of work and activism from students and staff to get something that was illegal for them not to provide? What are you talking about? It reminds me of the decades of activism that it took to get the NIH to officially mandate that clinical studies include both sexes, disaggregate data by sex, or, quote, provide a strong scientific justification for using only one sex. That's right, it took decades of activism just to get a requirement that medical research include representation from half the population. I think we can all agree that's dumb. And even now, women are still severely underrepresented in phase 1 clinical trials. Most studies don't provide disaggregated data by sex, even though they're supposed to, which means that even if women are included in the clinical study, we don't necessarily get a chance to look at the data separately and learn something about how something might be affecting women differently. And there's lots of studies that just don't abide by the NIH mandates. Okay, methodology rage out over. Joining our conversation is another person who made Period Power Stories possible. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Raine Grayson. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the organizational and programs manager at TMI Project. I directed the Period Power Stories podcast.
Can you tell us what TMI Project is?
TMI Project is a nonprofit organization that's been around for 15 years, based in the Hudson Valley. We help everyday unsung heroes tell the TMI parts of their story. So the parts of their story that people would typically leave out because of shame, embarrassment, fear, or stigma. We get those stories up on stage and we make people realize that that's what makes them human, and it helps people connect with each other, because so often the TMI parts of our stories are the parts that we most need to hear from each other.
Can you talk about the difference you see before and after you work with people on talking about this thing that we are so conditioned not to talk about, and what it's like to see them talk about it like in front of an audience of their peers and their parents and their teachers? How do you see them change?
The beautiful part about my job is that I get to watch this happen over and over and over again, where I get to go into a group of people who might want to talk about something that is a little taboo and they don't quite know how to do it. We help people be the main character of their own story, help put into perspective how like whatever they are talking about, whatever they went through, is kind of a big deal, and it's always celebrative, and it's always making somebody the superhero. And then you get 9 people who are doing that all together in front of an audience who's clapping for them. There's no way not to be transformed by the end of it. And it's not just the personal transformation. Storytelling is also such a powerful way to invoke activism that I think we all kind of know, but we don't know how. And working with Period Power Club really, really exemplifies that for me. Yeah, it's awkward to talk about periods. It's what we're taught, blah, 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 shame, blah, blah, blah. But it's so different when it's recounting a story that one of their peers said and talking about like the emotional effects of it, the effects on the other people in everybody's lives. Suddenly it's a human thing. It stops being this thing you can make excuses for, and it starts being like a person's story. And if somebody is coming to you and they're saying, I'm in pain and I need to be seen, that is received in such a different way sometimes than even in facts. And then when you pair that with facts, that's where the magic happens.
I was really curious to talk to Tina and Raine, the other 2 people in the room who have gone about 20 years since their own middle or high school period education experiences. I wanted to know what they remember.
I remember 5th grade and all the girls were in the gym and we had to watch on like a little black and white TV. We were all sitting down in front of it on the gym floor. And then we got our scoliosis test at that time. You know, you have to like bend over and
just covering all the bases.
Yeah. And the boys were in the other side of the gym. They had like a vinyl curtain. So they closed it and they were all like scootering around and you can hear them. And it was like, what the heck?
Like on scooters?
Yeah, like the little.
They were having like a fun day?
Where you put your butt down on and you scooter around like a little crab.
What?
Yeah, they were having a grand old time while we were like watching
bending over for a scoliosis.
Yes.
Raine, can you talk a little bit about your experience in high school, your awareness of periods, your story?
Yeah, definitely. I had the exact same experience where we watched some dumb video that I do not remember at all, threw it in with a whole bunch of other health stuff that had nothing to do with periods, and sent all of the boys off to have a great time. So I didn't really get a lot of education about periods when I was younger. I sought out a lot of my own education. When I first got my period, I didn't know what was happening. I remember I was actually very sick when I was a young child. And in my head, I was like, oh, cool. So my sickness is back and I'm dying.
Oh, no.
Yeah, just because my mom did not prepare me for it at all. I ended up actually interning with Planned Parenthood when I was younger in my sophomore year. It was really around like sex education and stuff like that. And it was teaching me to be a peer educator about sex education. It was a wonderful program. And I learned a lot more about periods there than I ever did anywhere else.
Yeah.
And then my relationship with periods got really complicated. You know, I am a trans man, so I have not gotten my period for a decade, but I remember it very clearly. I do not miss it. It was very complicated because I did not really want to talk about it even before I came out because there was a lot of dysphoria around it, and I didn't certainly see other trans people talking about it, so I certainly didn't. There wasn't education, and there was a lot of fear when I first got my period. And the shame just kind of continued to follow me. Like, Tina, you always ask in so many different situations, like, have you ever had a bleed through? I was the king of bleed throughs. I got them all the time. Like, every single time. I remember it with such vivid detail because it is so, even after doing all of this work, there is still so much like shame I carry. So yeah, I didn't really get taught a lot, and it was complicated and tricky. The kids that we were talking to who are, you know, now turning 18, 19, they were talking about having the same experiences now, which boggles my mind.
I have some young people in my life who are getting close to getting their periods and having to navigate their school's resources, or lack thereof. After 2 years of intense research and 22 years of pain and medical neglect, I feel like the only advice I have for them would be kind of a bummer. So I wanted to ask the most accomplished period activist in the room for her advice. Kat, there are a lot of people listening to this podcast who are going to have their period or already do, who are in schools that do not have this kind of support, these kinds of resources. What would you tell someone who wanted to have something like this in their school? How could they get this started from a student perspective?
So getting started in making your own period power club isn't as hard as you might think. You just need a bunch of like-minded individuals who are willing to put in the time and the effort to make the change. You got to look at what your school currently needs. Like, do they have menstrual product dispensers? Are you in a state that has laws that mandate that? If not, you can write a petition, get people to sign it. You can advocate, request a meeting with your principal or with the school board even. Find people who share the same values as you, share the same goals as you, and start organizing. Find someone like Tina to advise you and help you through this, someone who also supports, you know, what you want to do. And you can always contact us. You can contact Period Power. Just if you want advice, there's period.org as well. They're a great organization. It's really just what your community needs in particular. You know, maybe you live in a high poverty area and people are struggling to afford menstrual products. So maybe hosting menstrual product drives would be the way to go. Or maybe your school doesn't have the menstrual products, but legally they're required to, like if they're in the state of New York. Any public school in the state of New York, all the way up till SUNY and CUNY, are legally required to have menstrual product dispensers. So that is something to bring to the attention of the school board and, I'm not going to say threaten, but inform them of the legal ramifications of not
do what you
complying
gotta
with the
do.
law.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, because it is illegal to not have those products available. All of these laws, all these regulations are publicly available information. Just do a little bit of digging and you can make your own case for your own community for what you need.
I love that. One last question for you, Kat. If you could reinvent your middle and high school experience around your period and the kind of information and resources available to you, what would that look like? The dream.
Well, I'd first start with completely revamping our health education, just because it is so abysmal in many regards. But especially regarding menstruation, I'd make sure that all genders have to sit in and listen to an educational talk on both kinds of genitalia and discussions on intersex individuals as well, because that's not something that's talked about enough. And, there's a whole variety of things that a person could be, even biologically speaking, not considering societal perceptions on gender. So when you make sure everybody is informed and educated, that is the first step for progress. Women should know how penises and testes work, and men should learn about uteruses. And again, everything else in between. When you don't know how it works, you don't have empathy for that person. You can't fully understand. They're just like, oh yeah, they bleed and they're in pain. But like when they learn about what menstruators really go through, that is building another level of connection. And those people grow up to become the lawmakers that would hopefully protect menstruators in society, remove the pink taxes on menstrual products, make it so every school and every official building has to have, free menstrual products. When people are raised in ignorance, they just don't get it. They don't want to get it, that it doesn't affect them, even though it does. They don't realize that it does. So they don't care. Why would they do anything that doesn't directly benefit them?
Wow. Okay. Well, Kat, you're coming back for every single episode to talk about this. Thank you all for taking the time to talk to me. Is there anything else that you want to say real quick to people who are listening to this podcast who have had experience with period pain, who maybe have people they love in school and are maybe going to have to deal with this? Tina, we'll start with you.
Okay. Watch our podcast episodes. You can watch, you can listen. There's a documentary, and TMI Project is creating the education to help other schools implement and create the conversation. If you're a school and you're wondering, how do you get involved and do things, get in contact with us. We might have a budget to fly out and work with other schools or organizations.
I have 3.
Okay.
You can check out tmiproject.org. You can go specifically to tmiproject.org/period power. We also are in the process of creating a graphic novel that is also taking these stories, making them really accessible for a younger middle school age audience. We are creating a discussion guide to go along with the podcast, so you can start talking to other parents and people in your community about this. And we are developing curriculum, and we are available for workshops. So if you want to bring us in, just contact us.
That's it for this week's episode of Cramped. If you've had an experience with period pain education in middle or high school that you would like to share, we would love to hear it over on the Cramped Discord, which you can join by supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/cramped, even at the free level. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Kate Helen Downey or email us at crampedpodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.
What's happening to your body? We don't know because we've never really studied the female body.